over 5,000 pictures with my, professional type camera, plus what I took with my iPhone, plus about 200 videos. So I had a lot to pare down. And when I put this together for the church at home, I had a bunch to do that day, and so it was the last thing I was going to do before I went to bed that Saturday night. And so I had to cook for a church dinner the next day and do some other things around the house. So anyway, it got to be about 10 o'clock at night, and I thought, well, I'll sit down and get this whipped together. So I worked on it, looked at the clock, it was 11:30, and worked on it, looked up, it was 1 o'clock, and worked on it, looked up, it was 2 o'clock. Anyway, it was about 5 o'clock in the morning one time I looked. I thought, well, I might as well go to bed. So I worked on this till 6:30 in the morning. I got it down to about, I think, 180 slides, probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 videos. So it'll take just a little bit to go through, but I hope you'll find it interesting. And it's just kind of a mixture. Of course, the emphasis is on the work itself, but I'll give you a taste of the country and the continent and what it looks like over there and what it's like to be there. And maybe you can sort of get some rough idea of how our brethren live. And I can tell you this, that our brethren over there, for the most part, are very, very poor, and they're not part of the political class in Zimbabwe that live a little bit better. They live a very, very, very simple lifestyle that I think most of us, with what we're used to, would have a hard time adjusting to and living. But keep in mind that in spite of that, they're very happy people. And they really, many of them, especially those who are younger, they don't know any different. They've lived under the Zimbabwean government now, many of them for nearly all their lives, if not all their lives, and don't remember what it was like back when they were a British colony, or when they were part of the British Empire, which was, back then they were called Rhodesia. And the ones who do remember told me, said it was much better living under British rule. It was good when they first gained their independence, but the government is very, very corrupt, and they're just greedy, and they don't spend the money, and they take in a lot of money because they tax everybody to death and put all kinds of fees on everything, but they don't turn that into services and infrastructure and things for the people. The politicians pad their pockets with it, and it just feeds their corruption. So that's the kind of environment that they live in. But the brethren are just very wonderful people, and as you might imagine, and just content, and they are pressing on, doing the work of the church. Longest flight I've taken, and I've been to the Philippines, we had a direct flight from Atlanta to Johannesburg, South Africa. It was like almost 17-hour direct flight, but we left on March the 5th and arrived in Johannesburg on March the 6th. And just to give you some idea, it was an 8,500, I can look at my screen here, it was an 8,500 mile flight from Atlanta to Johannesburg. And then after we spent the weekend in Johannesburg, it was another 2-hour flight up to the capital of Zimbabwe, Harare. And if you're not familiar with African geography, these countries are down in the southern tip of Africa. A lot of people have asked me what the weather was like down there. Was it hot? Well, they're exactly flipped from us. And so when it's our spring, it's their fall. And they're getting into their harvest, or toward the end of their harvest season. It's the end of their rainy season. So most places we went, it was actually very pleasant. And in fact, in Johannesburg and in Harare, it was actually cool. And at night, it got chilly, especially when it was rainy. And then you'd go down in elevation, like down along the Zambezi River, when you go out in the bush and what have you, and it would get hot. And kind of like the deep south of the United States, you can be dead of winter down in Florida and still be hot and muggy on certain days. And that's kind of the way it was there. There's your, just again, kind of an idea of the flight path. And that's me probably about 15 hours into the flight. Bethany was texting me on the plane saying, "Are you making it?" I was sitting next to a couple. They were friendly people, and you like sitting next to friendly people unless they're so friendly that you can't get a break. and she was a retired woman pastor. And so when she found out I was a preacher heading over to Africa, that gave her occasion to talk. And when we got there, I was telling Brad and Josiah when we were standing in line at customs in Johannesburg that I sat next to I was in another part of the plane, that I sat next to a retired female pastor. Brad had the good line. He said she should have retired a long, long time before. And that's right. But anyway, that's what I looked like after that flight. I got no sleep on that flight going over there. So we got to Johannesburg, and just give you a taste of culture, what it's like. Johannesburg is a more prosperous and advanced country, and pretty modern. You get a taste of what you think of with the African bush over there. You have the poor people that live in much more modest means and what have you. But a lot of the brethren, not all of them, but a lot of the brethren have a vehicle maybe for the whole family, and you know, they have jobs, normal kind of 8 to 5 jobs, and you know, it's more comparable to our culture. And Johannesburg is actually, it's a humongous city of billions of people, but it's actually a nice city. And Richard and Marty Bunner love it over there. And Richard's in fact trying to recruit people to move over there. And you know, I have no desire to leave where I'm at, but if I were going to pick up and move somewhere to do foreign work, Johannesburg, I would consider going there, because it's a nice city, and you got a major airport where you can fly to other African countries very easily and economically, to go and preach from time to time, and so do whatever work you needed to do. And they've got a good work going in South Africa. The church there is growing, and Richard's doing a good job working with the Christians we already have there. You know, people ask, well, how did you do eating? Well, as long as you're in the cities over there, you do fine. They have restaurants, and you know, they're different than our rate, although you'll find Kentucky Fried Chicken in some of our, I didn't see any McDonald's, but things like that. They have their own chains. And this was a place we went the first night we got there that Richard and Marty liked. It had chicken, I think it was called Chicken and Ribs, or Beef and Ribs, or something like that was the name of the restaurant, but it's very good. This is a place that Richard and Marty had been renting, and it was sort of an Airbnb that they rented long term, and it was a nice little cottage thing that we stayed with them in that weekend. And they're getting ready to buy a place where the church actually meets, and I'm going to show you that in a second, or one of the 4 churches in Johannesburg. They meet on this property that has a little bit of acreage to it, and there's a house at the front where you enter the acreage, and Richard and Marty are in the process of buying that house, and consequently all of the outbuildings where several churches actually meet. And their plan is to leave our congregation there and run the other churches out to find somewhere else to meet after they own the property. So here we are. We got there when we flew in. Let's see, we flew in Friday night, and the brethren there at Cloverdine, it's called, wanted us to hold a little 2-night or 2-service meeting for them. And so we went on Saturday night and preached, and then worshiped with them on Sunday. And this is the lot, the house that Richard and Marty are going to buy, or are buying, sits back behind this tree, and then you come around and this large lot opens up. And this was the larger building that sits on that lot, and there were some cars there and people milling about. And so as we were parking, I opened the back door of the car where I was riding, and I heard some beautiful a cappella singing. And I thought, well, they've gotten here early and they're singing, waiting for us, you know. We just must be getting here a little late. And so Brad and Josiah were still getting their stuff out of the car and getting their Bibles out and all. And I just started on my own walking over here to meet people and what have you. And I walked through the door and stood there, and I saw people standing up in the front, kind of in a uniform of some kind, and they were singing, and it was really pretty kind of African style singing, a cappella, as I say, and people started turning around and greet me and what have you. And I guess he's their preacher or something. He came around to me, got up out of his seat and came back to me and introduced himself. And he said, "Are you by yourself?" And I said, "No." I said, "Brad and Josiah are still getting out of the car." And he gave me a puzzled look. And I was in the Seventh-day Adventist church. So anyway, I heard that wafted through the air. These videos, some of them may lag a little bit. The acronym on the back of the chairs clued me in that I was in the wrong place once the preacher gave me a puzzled look. So Seventh-day Adventist, Cloverdine Seventh-day Adventist Church. But anyway, very nice people. But I show that because they meet there, Then there's a holiness group that meets like in the little building just across the yard, and then there's a Baptist group over here, and then our group meets in a small little place just across the yard from that. And on Sunday, except for the Seventh-day Adventists, they're all having services at the same time, and you can hear the holiness people over there with their boom boxes and PA systems, and it's kind of a competition, so they're hoping to rectify that very soon. This is our group here in the little building, and as I say, we preached that night, had a decent little crowd. Let's see, this is Sunday morning. That's me preaching and the translator, and then here we had our lunch afterwards. This is Richard Bunner, by the way, and Marty sitting there. This man right here, and I'll show you a better picture of him in a minute, is talking to Richard. He is a native South African, and speaks with a British accent, and I got to know him, and come to find out, he was converted to our TV program, and I didn't realize it, but he had found the program and was converted. He was a member of the Digressive non-institutional group over there, and so he ran across our YouTube channel, and he was converted through that and made contact with the churches over there, and he was down in the city of Durban, which is down along the coast, but he moved up there to Johannesburg, and he meets with the church in that place. It's amazing, and I'll tell you another little story when we get deeper into this about somebody I'll show you, how technology has so shrunk the world, and how YouTube and even email, social media has given us the ability to, with the push of a button, send the truth to places where we had to move heaven and earth a number of years ago to get to and to find people. Just to give you a little taste of their singing over there. This is that Saturday night service at Kawvalley. Brad, y'all know him. That's their songbook.
In their way of thinking, this is what caused him to be in this deplorable situation. But what Jesus does next is irreprehensible in the eyes of the Jews.
So just a little taste of the service there. Usually there'll be 2 or 3 speakers. They like long services. They do not want a short service. We went to one place and they asked, I think we were just going to have Brad preach that particular service because we kind of got there late in the day. And they said, how long are you going to preach? And Brad said, I don't know, 40, 45 minutes. And they said, that's not long enough, put on a second speaker. And that's kind of the expectation wherever you go over there. And that's quite a contrast from a lot of places you go here, of course. This is on Sunday after services. And this man on the left, he's one of the main people there in that congregation. He's not a full-time preacher, but they kind of think of him as their preacher and one of their main leaders. There was my translator, young man, super nice guy, standing between me and Brad. The man on the left is the man I told you about that was converted through the program. This fellow that has his arm around him, he's an impressive young guy, got a young family, and he's an engineer and works there in Johannesburg. And he's originally from Zimbabwe, but he's just a really bright guy and really is taking more of a leadership role in the church there, and I was really impressed with him. The churches in South Africa are growing and they have a good future. These are some of the women, of course, they dress about like you imagine the people in Africa dress, the colorful attire and what have you. So they had dinner on the grounds for us, and they kept talking about having a cookout. Of course, we think of flipping hamburgers and hot dogs, but this is their cookout that they ended up having on Sunday. And I'll show you some more of this later in the presentation, but these ladies in the middle here are making what's called sudza. And that is a staple that you will eat everywhere you go over there, especially when you get out into the bush. And sudza is nothing but a coarse cornmeal that they just boil. I mean, they just get that pot boiling with water, they pour that in there and they thicken it up. It's like a paste. And that sort of becomes your base and you might eat a little chicken or something, or some other kind of meat. Maybe they make a little vegetable relish sometimes, but you put that on that suds and you eat it with your hands. But I tell people it's like grits without butter and salt. They're just very plain, but it was okay, and it's very filling. I will say that. You eat some of it and you're satisfied for a good part of the day. It's very filling. And there's their chicken they brought and their sausage down there, and that guy's gonna put it on the grill. And you know, it was actually very, very tasty. And by the time you stay over there a month, it's all very tasty. Because you get hungry after a while, riding around the bush. I went a place or two where I won't say it was tasty, but you make do.
The right one?
And you see there's their meal.
I'll have to get you one of those specials.
Well, some of these videos are going to lag a little bit, and that's just because how large the files are on this computer. So, sorry about that. So, there's a wide view on the right of that lot, and you can see the little buildings dotted. That's where all the churches meet at the same time. And this would cut down on bathroom trips, because if you need to go to the restroom, you have to leave and walk all the way across there, and your restroom is on the left over there, that little building on the left. So, your restroom accommodations over there, and this was very fancy compared to places we went in Zimbabwe. But that's where you would go to the restroom, and sometimes I think that'd be a good idea over here to cut down on some of the up and down we see from place to place. So we spent that first weekend in South Africa, and then we flew up to Harare, and that's where we spent the majority of the month in Zimbabwe. We worked out of Harare. Just to give you an idea of how large Africa is, you can see the outline of the various countries, and you know, down here, you think, well, you can just hop from country to country real easy, and you can on a plane, but like what was a 2-hour flight for us, the way the roads are over there, even in South Africa, if we had driven from Johannesburg up to Harare, it'd been about a 12-hour drive, and that would just been like right here. It's just a huge continent. Here's, you know, the United States up here, and all of our time is spent just right down in here, and you just go hours and hours and hours to get someplace. This is flying into Harare. When you fly into Johannesburg and look out the window, you see the bright lights, you see the skyscrapers, and you see nice neighborhoods, you see swimming pools behind houses in the nicer neighborhoods, just like you would in an American city. There are poorer areas, but then you fly into Harare, and you can already see the difference. This is the aerial view, and like those aren't swimming pools, some of those are like tarps over a dwelling, and what have you. And so even from the air, you can get a sense of how impoverished the country is. But it is a beautiful country. You can look past the unsanitary conditions in some places. If you can look past the slums, the dilapidated infrastructure, it's a beautiful country. And like in Harare is a pretty city, or it would have been, has been a pretty city. In fact, when Ron Corder and his family lived there in the 70s, and Alan Bonifay in the 80s, they said Harare was a beautiful city and a wonderful place to live. Now, boy, it'd be hard for me to live in Harare. I mean, it's congested, traffic is awful, and the infrastructure is terrible. The roads are just falling apart in many parts of the city, and but you know, it is made up for by a lot of the natural beauty that's there. There's just a canopy of trees down one of the more familiar thoroughfares in the town. You see monkeys everywhere. One of the first nights we were there, we had gone out before it got dark to a place called Heroes Acre, west of town. And of course they fought for their independence, you know, back in, I think they got their independence and became Zimbabwe in 1980. And they have a burial ground up there where the soldiers who fought in that war are buried. It's a beautiful place way up high, and you can see all of Harare down below. And so we're up there walking amongst all of that, and monkeys just started running out in front of us, and they were just absolutely everywhere. All over Harare, you see things like this. You want your souvenirs, these are cheap. Most of them are just trinkets you can get for nothing, but they're neat little things. A lot of them are actual stone carvings, and I brought a whole suitcase of stuff like that home. You can get some of that just for a few dollars. And Some of it is made by those people, some of it's stuff that they bought from some, wholesale deal, but you see that everywhere, and you go up, you think a used car salesman or the clerk at the department store is bad to try to sell you something. You walk up and down that sidewalk, and you will absolutely just be flogged by all of these people wanting you to walk in their booth. They will show you this, they will sell you that, and it's quite overwhelming. But I did give them some business. Here's the traffic, and that's normal. That's not like, well, there's an accident. That's what you see all over the city, and they have traffic laws, but they might as well not have traffic laws. And they have red lights, except they call their red lights robots. They have robots around the city, and I'm not kidding, over half of them don't work. They're just dark. And even the ones that work, a lot of people won't pay attention to them. And you just have to make your own way. They drive like Britain on the other side of the road, and you sit on the right, the driver sits on the right side of the car. But let me tell you, it was nerve-wracking. I didn't do any driving. It was and Brad's a good driver. It was nerve-wracking, just sitting there and watching him avoid everybody. And we keep a vehicle over there, and we've gotten, not we, me, but they have gotten hit in years past and had to have the truck repaired several times. And it's, every time you get in the truck, you think you're probably going to get hit by somebody or sideswiped or rear-ended. That's what it's like. Of course, a lot of people don't have vehicles. They walk, and like this man, he's probably going to sell these pails and buckets and what have you. And that's how a lot of them over there make their living. Talk about if you go to what people eat. If you go to the grocery store and peruse the meat aisle, you'll see things like that. Ox lungs. I don't know what that on the left is. I didn't ask. Afraid to, but that's their meat selection. This here is the house that Ron Corder had built in the mid-70s when he moved over there. And it's a modest house, but it's for Zimbabwe standards, it's a nice little house. And it's a little 3-bedroom house, and just clean as can be. And Ron had that built, and he and his family lived there, and then other preachers who went after Ron have lived there. And now the preachers who go, Roger Boone goes every fall and spends a month, and Brad goes every spring and spends a month. That's your headquarters. And believe me, after you've slept in a tent and the few little hotels you get to stay in here and there, you're glad to get back to that house. And you've got a bed, and it's clean, just everything's nice. And there's a man who's a member of the church who lives in he stays most of the time in a little cottage back behind there. And he keeps the place up. He's kind of the groundskeeper, and he watches it. And there's a lot of crime, and so it's gated. It's got a big fence all the way around it, and a gate. And anyway, that brother, he watches that house and kind of keeps it protected, and he does a very good job. That was my room, and again, I was very glad to get back to it from time to time when we would come in from our several-day journeys out into the bush. And this right here, this is the brother who watches the house. This is his daughter. She's a sweet girl, and or young lady. She is a wonderful cook, and she made dinner. We would buy the groceries, and she would cook them for us. And she makes, this is rice instead of suds, and this is butternut squash, and some fried chicken she fried, and that vegetable relish. And the way she seasoned it, it really was delicious. And so we looked forward to getting back to Harare after our trips, and we'd get her to cook us a meal, and she did a really, really good job. And she's a member of the church there in Harare. Okay, so when it comes to the work in Zimbabwe, there are at least 80 congregations that we know of. And when I say we know of, there's been so much growth at different times, and things change, and so there are lapses where we kind of lose track of what all we have everywhere. But Brad told me we feel confident we have congregations that we just are not connected to right now that still worship scripturally. But there are about 80 congregations that we know of in the country. And amongst those 80 congregations, we have 7 full-time men. And for their ages, 3 of those preachers are between the ages of 84 and 93. And 4 of them are between the ages of 37 and 55. So they need preachers. And Brad called me today, actually, and he said there is a man, and he was an impressive younger man, had a family, and Brad is hoping to add him before very long as a full-time evangelist there. I hope that can be the case. The Zimbabwe work, it came originally from the Malawi work, and I believe Jerry Cutter was probably the first who went over to Zimbabwe. I think he might have had to go over there due to maybe visa issues or something, but anyhow, they worked and got that going. And of course, as we say, Ron Corder, others such as Alan Bonifay, Bill Davis have lived over there. And Roger Boone, he lived in Zambia and he's had a hand in it. Now Brad has gone there for several years. So several preachers have been involved in that work. We spent the first 3 or 4 days before we left and went out in the other parts of the country in Harare, and most of that is just preliminary work. There's a lot of business and housekeeping to do during that time. And just to give you an idea of I won't say it's sort of a challenge to do the work from over here, over there. You know, when you get there, you just have a list of things that you have to get done. You have to go and renew insurance on the vehicle. You have to go get a new registration for the vehicle. You have to get either a new fire extinguisher, and depending on how many passengers in the car, or recharge the fire extinguisher. And you know, the Zimbabwe government is very, very strict about that. And they will check, they have checkpoints all over, and they will stop you and many times check for that, and they are very glad to write a ticket that goes into the coffers that benefit the politicians. Or if you bribe them, many of them will gladly take a bribe to get you out of the ticket. That's really what they want. And so that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a very corrupt government in Zimbabwe. We spent a day nearly going all over Harare just looking for grape juice. That's another challenge, is getting and keeping churches out of the bush stocked with grape juice for the communion. So that's kind of the preliminary stuff. This getting ahead of himself. So we spent those first 3 days there, and then we took a couple of personal days before we went to start our preaching out in the distant places in the country. We went up to the Zambezi River and at Chirundu, and this is up on the Zambia border, just along up in here. And that was a beautiful, beautiful part of the country. And we took an evening and a morning to go to a little safari area up there, and we did a tiger fishing expedition. We just out of our own money hired a guide and went out fishing for a night and a morning for tiger fish, and I'll show you more about that in a second. But I want to give you an idea of what it's like to travel around the country. This right here is a major highway. This is not a back road. This is a major highway that cuts through the entire country. It would connect South Africa to Zambia and what have you. And this is a decent stretch of it. And that first trip that we made from Harare, you see up there in the northern part, all the way up there to the border, I would say that's probably like 170, 180 miles, and it took us nearly 12 hours. Because you're driving like this that entire way. And as I say, that right there is decent, you know, comparatively decent road. But it's some beautiful countryside as you're going. But you are constantly dodging potholes, and that video doesn't even show how deep some of those potholes are. I said that I would like to own a alignment and shock and strut business over there, tire business. And we're clipping along pretty good there. A lot of it, you're just creeping and crawling. Let's see if Now we're running out of pavement. And I would say that was paved at one time, and the pavement is just finally all disintegrated. And some you can see little patches of pavement. And you're just dodging trucks like that for 180 miles. And it's exhausting. And I can't imagine Brad driving. It's exhausting riding through that. And look at that. You just have to get over it. So here we're getting close to the river. We stopped counting, I think it was at I have to ask Brad, but I think we got up to like 500 trucks, and we stopped counting, and they were solid. And all they're doing is waiting to get across the border into Zambia. So that's why it takes so long to get anywhere. But payback is you get views like that. That's when we're coming down into that river bottom area, and it's just gorgeous. This is along the Zambezi River, some of those beautiful, dramatic sunsets and skies I've ever seen. Just gorgeous. This is down what we call golden hour in photography. We've been fishing and fished a little bit longer before we headed in. The Zambezi River is a huge river, very powerful river, and it is full of hippopotamuses and crocodiles and all kinds of wildlife. And elephants, we saw all kinds of wildlife up and down the river, and hippos everywhere. And you know, hippos are just kind of goofy looking creatures to us, but they are actually one of the meanest animals on the face of the planet. They're very dangerous. And if you're in a smaller boat, they can try to turn your boat over and what have you. They can be very aggressive and defensive. And they didn't bother us, but then they'd pop up all around us, and you can see their eyes, and they'd blow, they blow that water up in the air. It was kind of intimidating, but anyway, it's a beautiful river. There's some hippopotamuses, one of them blowing. This is a wild elephant that was just along the bank of the river. When his ears are out in that second picture, he's flaring his ears, and it's kind of a warning. They look at you, and sometimes they'll trumpet, but they'll just kind of blow up at you a little bit. You're making them nervous when you get close. And I'm shooting with a long 600 millimeter lens, so we are a good little distance away. Let's see here. Another view of the river. Bottom of the river. Here we are just cruising along. Full of mosquitoes. When you get over there, the first thing we do is go to a pharmacy and get anti-malaria medicine. You start popping those malaria pills every day, and you want to do that 3 or 4 days before you go out into the mosquito-infested areas, like along the river here. Okay, so here we're fishing for tigerfish. These are actually small. That's Josiah Nichols. And Josiah, he doesn't hardly ever fish. You don't think of Josiah as a fisherman. And we took Isaac with us, who is one of the older native preachers there, his son, who's now a preacher. Isaac had never been fishing in his life, and so we invited him, and we treated him to the trip with the guide and what have you, and he caught his first fish on that trip. But Josiah was proud of this, and me and Brad, who like to fish, and we think we know something about fishing, neither one of us caught a fish. It was Josiah and Isaac that caught the fish. But those tiger fish, I don't know if you can see in that picture, the teeth on those things, and those are small. Those, they have the giant tigerfish on down the river that in the reservoir that they get huge, and they're actually very dangerous fish. They're related somehow to the piranha, but they're one of the most fierce freshwater fish on earth. And when you get one, you've got a fight on your hands. So anyway, that was an enjoyable little aside. This is Isaac, and Isaac is a great man. He's a great preacher, and great credit to the work there. And as I say, you can see he's very proud of his first fish. But I'm building up to this right here. This is how these preachers over here are. This is how diligent they are. This man over on the left is our fishing guide. And he was a nice guy, kind of quiet, reserved, nice guy. And we're riding along, fishing, enjoying the scenery, and they're speaking in Shona, their native language. And so we don't understand what they're saying, but the conversation goes on and on and on. But after a while, I hear baptisma, and then a little later I hear Roman Catholic, and terms like that. So I figured out they're talking about religion, and come to find out, Isaac has just started talking to this man about the church and about the truth while we're fishing. And this man is a Roman Catholic, and he lives in Karoi, which is a couple hours up the road where we're fixing to go preach. He just comes down here and works as a fishing guide, and then he'll go home and see his family, from time to time, or on the weekend, whatever it is. And he got genuinely interested talking to Isaac, and he told Isaac next time he came to Karoi to preach, which goes up every, on a regular rotation, he wanted Isaac to come to his home and study with he and his family. And so that's just how open these people are to hearing the truth. They want the truth. And so, anyway, I was just impressed that while we're sitting there tied up in fishing, Isaac's back there trying to convert our guide, and he may end up very well. He might have by now. I need to text him and see how that turned out. But,
Kevin, are there 6 of you on the boat?
5 of us. Yeah, there's Brad and Josiah in the back, our guide, and Isaac and me.
You were the
I'm taking the
captain.
picture. Here we are eating, and this is this little safari lodge. Like I said, this was all on our own dime. But you're eating, there's an elephant. That's just a wild elephant walking through the grounds. And when you stay in those little bungalows or cottages, they'll tell you be careful when you go out at night, because there are hippos and elephants and all other kinds of crocodiles. You're right there on the river, and you have to watch it. They were just milling all about the darkness while we sat there and ate our dinner. So we did our fishing a night and a morning, and then we left and we drove back the way we came, down up to here, to a community called Karoy. And this was my first experience of going to church and preaching out of the bush. And give you a taste of this. Back down that awful major highway, those few hours, thought you'd never get there. We were going to meet one of the local members at a market there in Karoy and buy supplies. By that I mean buy food that we were going to take out there for the women to cook for us after we had services. And so we met at the market, and then we were going to drive back up, kind of backtrack and go out in the country where the church was. Well, they were like, well, it's not very far, it's just outside Karoy. And so we get in the car, we head back up the highway, and we drive, and we drive, and we drive. I don't know how many miles it was, but we were well out of town. And finally, he says, you turn up here on this dirt road. And so we turned onto a genuine dirt road, which was awful. It was a washboard. We turned on the dirt road, and he said, no, we'll go down this road about an hour. And we did. We went down that road about an hour, and again, that's the better part of the road. You can see the pavement just gets narrow and narrow, just into a strip. It's just worn out, and the government doesn't fix it. You imagine traveling down that, they have their rainy season where it just sets in and rains through the summer, you know. And you come up on stuff like that all the time.
There was a live field tied up.
Okay, so after we'd driven on that road an hour better, we finally turned on this little lane, and we're coming into a little bitty dwelling, little cluster of huts. And that building you see right there is on one of the brethren's property, and that's, he let them build that there, and that's where they have church. That's where they meet. And this was a neat little place, but it was just a beautiful, beautiful spot. We'd had storms on and off through the day, and just look at that beautiful sunset sky that is forming there. But we're driving. Everybody else who attends that church walks. Everybody will walk. That's their meeting place. And so this is what the sunset looked like after we got in and got our tent set up, and looking back there at the building. This is kind of the area where the family lives. They're members of the church there. And no, that's sometimes these little round huts will be their kitchen. More times than not, I saw where they were cooking outside. They just cook outside over an open fire. But a lot of times that's their dwelling. One place we went, the church meets in one of those. That old man, he's sort of the old patriarch of the group, and that's his property where the church meets. That's Isaac again on the right. He's the preacher over there that he lives near Harare, but he's one that he goes up in that area when he can, preaches and kind of helps those churches out. He works that area. And a younger member standing on the left there. There we are. We camp when we go out in the bush. Most times we take a tent, and me and Brad and Josiah, we just all sleep in that tent right there. And you generally just pitch your tent right there in front of the people's hut or dwelling. And that little building back there without the roof behind us, that's the bathroom. And the bathroom consists of that. It's a hole in the ground. And here's where they wash their dishes. Right here. And some of the ladies taking a little break, kind of getting things together. They're gonna cook for us that night, plus go to church. She's tending to her chores. Young man just kind of waiting for everything to come together for us to go have church. These were sweet kids, and they were just hanging around and playing throughout that evening until we got ready to go to services. They were very curious. They're just happy kids. They don't have two nickels. Well, they wouldn't have nickels, but they don't have two nickels to rub together. They're just happy kids, and you can see their little homemade soccer ball. It looked like twine. They just rolled up and made a soccer ball, and I just videoed them one that next morning out there playing. They just had the time of their life. Either barefooted or wearing their Crocs. Anyway, they were cute kids. This is another group of the kids. They were very curious about my camera, and they liked having their picture taken. Look at that again, that sunset sky that night. It's just incredible.